We just need to huddle everyone at the table.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. It is time to get the meeting started, and we do have a quorum in the room. So if you would please find a seat and we will get the meeting started. We've got a lot of great stuff to present today. Yes.
There you go.
All right, let me go ahead and call the meeting officially to order at 11:32, it looks like. We're glad you're all here. This is the most fun committee you will ever serve on. It is the longest standing serving committee of SANDAG, and we have some fantastic presentations today from Coastal Frontiers about what's been going on the beaches and the sand for the last year, and also from the port about the exciting, innovative stuff they're doing. But first, we'll go through our regular business. And the first thing is, I will ask the clerk, Ms. Tesalero, to confirm that we have a quorum in the room.
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum.
All righty. Thank you very much. And on to item 1 on the agenda. That is a chance for public and member comments. And first, let's see if we have any public. Tessa, do we have any members of the public that wish to speak to items not on the agenda?
I have no public comments at this time.
All right. Is there anybody in the room from the public that wanted to make a comment at this point? All right. Moving along. This is the next item is a chance for member comments. If you have something going on in your jurisdiction that you think would be of interest to the group, this is your chance to speak up. Just shoot your hand up in the air and I'll call on you if you'd like to make a comment. Yes, Mitch.
First of all, I want to thank everybody for welcoming to myself to this, my first meeting of the SANDAG Preservation Working Group. I have participated in previous years as a non-elect through a couple different groups that I helped represent and co-found. But I did want to mention, and I think it may be on your list, there's a future meeting coming to Imperial Beach. We plan to host at the Tijuana Estuary Visitor Center. So I do invite you all to come down to that. You will see firsthand the impacts of the sewage, and I encourage you to bring your camera. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anybody else that wanted to make a comment at this point, including people I see are still coming in? If not, and if you think of something, raise your hand and I'll call on you, but let's back up a moment. I'm advised by Tessa that we do have one public commenter. Is that person online?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I apologize. I had 2 hands raised a little bit late, but I do have 2 public commenters, both online. The first is the original draw. Please go ahead.
As we talk about the shore and all the TJ, shenanigans that are going on, I don't think we need to be engaging with Mexico when this is happening at their own hand, and they're not willing to do anything with it yet. We want to sit and engage with them and do business across the border. But all while then we have to pay the cost to fix this emergency because it's not being stopped and it continues to take place. And all we do is, declare it a national or whatever emergency. And, so you can get money, but I don't understand why we would still engage with Mexico and do all this business with them to, even help them. When they're not doing anything to stop that sewage from coming into the water. They're literally dumping it in there. So why would we then still want to engage with people that are causing us more trouble and having us, people have to live in those conditions because it's not being stopped. So, I mean, no matter how much money gets thrown at that, you still have to stop the problem. So either you go to Mexico and have them stop the problem, or you're just going to keep getting money, because that's the idea. If you get rid of an emergency or any kind of problem, the money quits coming in, right? So it's like, why would you want to stop it? Because then you can't continue to get more funds and act like we need to do something. Instead, you should be doing something that is beneficial to the people and not just to Mexico, all while they're, polluting the water intentionally. it just is very negligent to be doing that. And I don't see how any of that's going, if we're just talking about it, if we're just, trying to figure out ways to clean the water and not actually going to the source of the issue, you're never going to stop the problem. So, it's ridiculous to sit here and do busy work and talk about it and, get funds but never go back to the source of where it's coming from. Because if you don't go to that source, it's going to continue and it will never stop. But that's the way you guys can get money. So I don't know if that's why you're doing that and you're ignoring the fact that it's coming from them, and that they could do something about it. Instead, we're just, declaring emergencies and, still doing business with Mexico. So please do something for the people instead of just declaring emergencies, getting money, and not really going to the source, all while doing business with the people that are doing these nefarious things to our own nation. So that's it.
All right, thank you very much for your comment. Because your comment is on an item not on the agenda, we're not really in a position to respond to it, but people did listen and hear it, including the staff. So we thank you for taking the time to comment. And we have another commenter, I think.
Thank you. Our final commenter on this is Catherine Rhodes. Catherine, please go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And today it looks like a really great agenda. One of the things to do with the border pollution also is, I always, as a civil engineer, I want actual solutions. And, the solution was to get money, which you got, or the EPA got, but nothing's actually happening. And so what I recommend that you as a board of SANDAG and regional leaders do is try to create a new SANDAG project, very similar to how you created the Otay Mesa East Port of Entry project, so that you could take over all the issues that the EPA is supposed to solve and the International Boundary and Water Commission are supposed to solve, and actually get these projects started. They have the money. I don't know that any project has ever been started. The money, I think, was approved a couple years ago. How much money of the 350 million is still left unused? I don't know. I'm not sure if you know either. I'm sure the EPA knows.
I think you have both.
Also what I think that you need to do is for Border Park to be able to create a new SANDAG project so that we could actually have a Borderfield State Park, that could be overseen by this border committee, similar to what could be, be done. So there's a pathway that you can follow. You have the pathway laid out before you with the Otay Mesa East Port of Entry. It's a one-off thing. I think it needed, Congress to make it happen. And you could do the same type of thing so we could actually get some local control over this. Right now, there's literally zero local control. And then further on, I wanted to, always, of course, mention my La Playa plan, which I think is the solution for San Diego for so many different things, which includes being able to use the sand that we have and use it on our shorelines, especially in the area of the Port of San Diego. And one thing that I really like that you're doing, or the presentation coming up soon, is whenever I brought up my La Playa plan for full tidelands reclamation, everybody at the port or the city or SANDAG would always say, you can't do that because you're arming the coast. And I would always say, no, what I'm saying is you're arming the coast in areas where it's already armed. So all you're doing is actually being able to future-proof against sea level rise. And it's when you arm an area or, make an area more armored, it's actually a good thing, not a bad thing. And people would always say, the California Coastal Commission would never approve of this type of thing, but it seems like they will. So thank you.
Thank you very much for the comment. Again, because it's an item not on the agenda, we can't really respond to it, but we did listen to it and staff did as well, and we appreciate you taking the time. Ms. Gasterlin, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, yes, thank you, Councilmember. I was going to call you Councilmember Drucker. Right, how about that? Terry Gasterlin from Del Mar. I'm the alternate on our Shoreline Preservation Working Group here. And Dwight, of course, is our primary. On Tuesday, we had 2 days ago, we had a city council meeting and we passed a resolution endorsing and asking for SANDAG to really do an extraordinary outreach effort beyond what's been done before, ever, regarding realigning the railroad tracks off the bluff in Del Mar. You know, these tracks are on a bluff. The bluff is crumbling. It's 1.5 miles of bluff. The tracks go through about a mile plus another half mile, a mile of wetlands going to the south. So these are kind of secondary wetlands out of San Diego River area. And they go through 2 miles of the Penasquito Lagoon. And then, of course, we have the Del Mar Hill, which is effectively a limestone bluff, a continuation of the coastal bluff system, as we well know. I'm looking at my scripts colleague over here. And what I wanted to bring to this group's attention is that the people of Del Mar are asking a lot of questions. They have fear. Fear can turn into anger. So we're going to hear here at Shoreline Preservation, at SANDAG, we need to be ready to understand that the anger that we're hearing is rooted in fear, and that this outreach that's going to happen needs to help people get beyond the fear and start thinking. Well, some people are thinking, and they're asking, is it possible to have an alignment that somehow gets across the fairgrounds instead of under Del Mar to get to I-5. The train would be a minute to a minute and a half slower at its optimal projected most fast speed, but it wouldn't be tunneling underneath people's houses through a limestone bluff of effectively unknown geology with a lot of uncertainties. So I'll be asking tomorrow that the SANDAG board consider making sure that we look carefully at the fairgrounds alignment. But I wanted this group to be aware so that when you hear the fairgrounds alignment, you have a sense of why we would be looking at it, and that the anger that you will be hearing is fear projected and expressed as anger. Thank you, Dwight.
All right, thank you for that comment. Let me double check with Tessa. Are we finished with the public comments from online?
Thank you, Chair. The public comments are concluded.
All right, great. I'm not seeing any other hands from board members at the moment, but if you think of something as we go along, just shoot your hand up. So next, we're going to turn it over to Courtney Pessy of the SANDAG staff, and she is going to provide a quick update on the Sediment Management Technical Task Force Oceanside Littoral Cell. Courtney?
Thanks, Chair. And I know that's a mouthful, so I have been reducing it to SMTTOLC because that's easier.
I call it the Pound Sand Committee. I can remember that.
But I just wanted to give an update that I sent out the save the date for everybody who has volunteered to participate on the SMTTOLC group, and it'll get quicker, I promise. So that first meeting will be at Del Mar's Town Hall on Thursday, September 28th from 9:30 to 11 a.m. So that meeting will only be in person due to limited technical capabilities. So please do try to come in person, and we look forward to kicking off our first meeting.
All right, thank you, Courtney. And next up is Keith Greer from SANDAG staff, who is going to provide us with a status update on Phase 1 preliminary planning activities for Regional Beach Sand Project 3. Keith.
Good morning. It's nice to see everybody. I just want to talk a little bit about the next possible regional beach sand project. I know this group has been over the last year and a half talking about the possibility of moving forward with a regional beach sand project and starting the initial work, which is the planning studies necessary to actually do the future construction. So this planning studies included both the feasibility studies and the economic analysis that's required to eventually attract grant funding to actually go into engineering and construction. I want to say that the RFP is currently out to select a consulting firm to do those Phase 1 planning studies. The next Thursday, the RFP will close, and after that, we'll select a contractor. And then by the time this group meets again, we expect to be well underway with that RFP or with the process to actually do the planning studies. The other thing I wanted to mention is we've been talking to our neighbors to the north up in Orange County, and the city of San Clemente, which is part of the Oceanside Littoral Cell, is very interested in this process. So much so that they provided a letter to the chair asking to be part of that planning studies to do the next regional beach sand project. And so we had that letter. We were able to include in the task force an optional task to look at extending the studies up from the Oceanside up north to San Clemente. So as the RFP comes in, we will have an optional task. It won't affect any of your cities. But if San Clemente wish to enter into some kind of MOU with SANDAG, we can include them into that work as well. So we're excited about that. Looks like the interest is expanding beyond San Diego County and into Orange County as well. So that concludes my quick staff report.
Thank you very much, Keith. It's an exciting project that we're getting going and a powerhouse group on the committee, and you'll hear more about it. And you're all, of course, welcome to attend the meetings. The next, a quick update from me on two items. One, the City of Oceanside has been working on a sand retention project. And if you may recall, they started off with a pilot growing program proposal that got a lot of pushback from neighboring cities. To their credit, Oceanside sort of rebooted and restarted the process in a much more open and inclusive way, looking for creative solutions. They did an international solicitation of firms to propose. They appointed a jury of 10 voting members, including 2 representatives from coastal cities. One is me and the other is Joy Lyons from Encinitas. And then there are various other professionals, including from the Coastal Commission and from elsewhere. On this jury to help them review the proposals and to select them, recommend selections. And that process has been completed, and the City of Oceanside selected 3 firms to proceed, and they are as follows. One is called Deltares, which is from the Netherlands. And of course, they know a lot about how to manage water and flood situations in the Netherlands. Another one is called what is it called? Hold on just a second here. International Coastal Management, and they're from Australia and have a lot of experience with beaches on the Gold Coast that, at least in their opinion, are similar to Oceanside situation. And the third one is called Scape, and they're US based from New York and have various affiliates. Last Tuesday was the first workshop on this proposal, and it was a packed house at Oceanside. And the 3 companies that I just mentioned each made a 20-minute presentation that was pretty high conceptual level. And then they all had booths outside, and they interacted with the crowd and answered questions and did their thing. So I would say overall, it was very interesting and very creative. We heard proposals on how to use sand bypass systems, how to use headlands of various sorts, sand traps, green and public spaces, breakwaters, cobble spines, reefs, dune fields, natural solutions, energy generation, and more. And there were no specific proposals other than these are all the tools that are in the toolbox that can be used to address Oceanside's problem. And then they were looking for public feedback on what were the priorities from the public. They're going to revise their proposals, taking into account that feedback that they got. And there's going to be 2 more workshops, one October 17 and one December 13. Then the jury will make a recommendation that will go to the Oceanside City Council in January, and they will select the winning proposer. And then they'll have to chase down the money, and then they'll have to go to Coastal Commission and get approval. So we'll try to keep you updated on that as it goes along, because it's a very interesting project. Some of you may have seen it. It was written up in the New York Times last week, because what they're doing is pretty creative. The second thing I wanted to just point out is the League of California Cities is having its annual conference in Sacramento, I think next week, the 20th to the 22nd. And the Cal Cities Shoreline Working Group, which is a subset of the 73 cities in California, believe it or not, that share a coastline. And there's a representative from each region to that group. And I'm the San Diego rep, having taken over for Ed Spriggs. We will be doing a presentation at that conference. Don't know yet if it's going to be on Wednesday or Thursday, but the schedule should be out soon. So if you are attending the conference, please stop by. We'd love to have you attend. And that concludes for my updates. Now we're going to item 2, which is the approval of the March meeting minutes. And I understand we have one correction, right? Yes.
Yeah, Mitch McKay from State of Imperial Beach. On the attendance chart, it shows myself as being in attendance. I was not. I believe it was Paloma Gary, our mayor, who was actually here. So
all right.
That's the only correction I'm requesting.
All right. Thank you. Yes.
You may have found a typo, but it might not be a typo. Under section 4, the third paragraph says that blurb regarding SAD beach erosion, which it could be sad, but
I think it's missing an N, I hope. But yeah, all right. Thank you for that. All right. With those two corrections, anything else? If not, do we need to vote on this? Do we need to vote on the minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll move approval with the as amended.
All right. Thank you. I have a motion. Do we have a second? All right. It's been seconded by Councilmember Donovan. Any further? All right. One recusal. Any further discussion? If not, let's call the question. Can we do it as simply as tell people to put their hands up? Just raise your hand if you're a yes. Any no's? And one abstention.
Two abstentions. I wasn't here.
Two abstentions. Okay. Three abstentions. All right. Thank you for that. I'm not even going to ask if that affects our quorum because I don't want to know. All right. Next item, we're moving on to reports, and this is getting into the fun stuff. First up is item number 3, which is the Shoreline Preservation Working Group Fiscal Year 24 Work Plan updates, and Courtney Pessy is going to present an overview of the draft work plan and invite members to provide any input for future meetings. So Courtney?
I almost made it just in time is when you called my name. Thank you. In lieu of keeping to the timing and making sure we get to the other reports, I'm going to do a quicker version of my presentation, but let's get started. For those who may not know me, my name is Courtney Pesh. I am the program manager for the Regional Shoreline Management and Monitoring Program here at SANDAG. And as Chair Warren alluded to, I will be talking about the fiscal year 24 work plan. Now, many of you might recognize the slide that was given last year at last September. As a refresh, in order to make more effective and meaningful meetings, the Shoreline Preservation Working Group has proposed a work plan each year. This work plan has identified topics that were derived from input from previous meetings, active projects, and research being performed throughout the region. If you look to the screen above, you'll see a snapshot of the fiscal year 2024 work plan with proposed future meeting topics ranging from the state of the science, coastal adaptation planning, shoreline monitoring, and beach sand preservation projects. Now, this is just a tentative timeline for when those topics will be presented at future Shoreline Preservation Working Group meetings. And I do want to emphasize that this work plan is flexible and adaptive. So if we need to reconfigure or reorder meetings due to unforeseen topics or discussions, we are able to do that. And with that, this item is for information and discussion only. No action is required. My contact information is on the slide above. So if you have any ideas or recommendations that come to you after this meeting, you could send them over to me. And with that, I will open the floor for discussion.
Thank you, Courtney, for being brief. And let me just ask you, is there a time deadline if people want to comment on this to you? That they need to do it by?
Since this is evergreen, as I put it, so if you have something that comes to you at any point throughout fiscal year 24 that you think is important that we need to present or talk about at a future working group meeting, we can make those adjustments at that time.
All right, thank you. Does anybody have a question or a comment they want to make at this point? All righty, moving along. I think I do need to check. Tessa, do we have any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair. I want to confirm there were no public comments on item 2. And on item 3, I have 2 virtual commenters. The first is Catherine Rhodes. Please go ahead.
Hello. This is Catherine Rhodes. And every year I come here and try to put on my La Playa plan for you guys to actually analyze. And the reason for that, it would literally take care of so many different things that we need in San Diego. One of the things I just wanted to mention that, first of all, there's no limestone in Del Mar. It's sand, clay, and gravel. There's no, so it's sandstone, but it's not actually limestone. And so one of the things with my La Playa plan, it does such really good things. It actually is an adaptive strategy to do a full tide tideland reclamation instead of what we have now, which is called what I call a partial tideland reclamation. That is, when we put in bulkheads, the bulkheads are porous, and the water is behind them. And what that creates is a lot of liquefiable soils that we build upon, which is inherently unstable. And the other part of the La Playa plan is to actually analyze our mineral resource zone 1, which is all San Diego Bay, and see if we could actually analyze it to see if we could actually use that sand on our beaches or for construction material. We never ever analyzed if this is good enough sand that we could use for construction. And the reason for that is San Diego and SANDAG actually gets a lot of their sand for construction from Canada. We barge it in from Canada. When we have this beautiful natural resource, we're so rich, but we see the sand as junk when it's not junk. It's never been analyzed. And also what it does, my La Playa plan, it future-proofs against sea level rise. And so, right now, what will happen when there's sea level rise on the bay, a lot of the streets and roads will, get broken up, like it is in front of, on Midway in front of the post office. And what you could actually do is, a nice new example of the La Playa plan, for future proofing for full tidal reclamation is the Navy Broadway complex, which I'm not sure what it's called anymore, maybe Pacific Gateway or N1 or something like that. But that's a perfect example of what I talk about when I talk about the La Playa plan to do a full tidal reclamation so that we can future-proof against sea level rise. It does everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment. Tessa, we have another commenter.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we do. The final commenter on this item is the original draw. Please go ahead.
So I guess I have some questions because I don't really understand what beach nourishment means. And, where would you plan on getting this sand that you want to, replace? Like, are you taking sand and replacing it with other sand, or are you just adding sand? It's just a little bit weird. And all of this climate stuff is a bunch of BS. Like, that's the whole thing, is this is just a way to like control the people and get things under, like change the way society lives, and all to save a planet. But it's all, going against, like, if we got rid of all carbon, that means none of us, we wouldn't even be able to talk on this because we're carbon based. Everything living is carbon based. So all of this stuff, when we talk about the climate and like even the sea level rising, like that's not how things work. It's not like all of a sudden, like the shoreline's going to be in, Riverside or something. And I just feel like we do a bunch of this stuff that is not necessary. But what are you talking about when you talk about beach nourishment? Is that some kind of like, are you going to be spraying? I mean, because we have spraying on chemicals all over the time, claiming that it's going to like help plants or whatever, or get rid of weeds, but it's really Agent Orange that's being sprayed. We never really want to get down to the like nitty gritty of what's really going on. And it's really sad because there's a lot of like psychological like warfare going on right now with the people, making them believe that we need to be afraid because the climate is changing. And so we have to do all of these things so drastically and change the way of living and, like do things that are actually bad for the environment. So if you could explain what beach nourishment means and why you would have a need to replace the sand, that would be really nice. Thanks.
All right, thank you for your comment, and I would encourage you to stick around. The next item, we're going to hear the monitoring report, and you'll learn a lot about sand and sand movement. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to address the question of, is Del Mar limestone or sandstone? And really, depending on how you define limestone and sandstone, and there are many, many different definitions, it's both. And I will read from the U.S. Geologic Survey, just one sentence, if that's okay.
Sure.
Great, thank you, Dwight. This is from pages 187 through 246, one sentence. Delmar sand. Sandstones, shales, and some beds composed almost wholly of oysters that might be considered limestone, but usually the matrix surrounding the shells is argillaceous rather than calcareous. The second sentence, the sandstones are both coarse-grained and fine-grained and grade into arenaceous shales. I just want to make it clear. When I say limestone, I'm summarizing, but I'm summarizing a very complicated geology.
All right, thank you for that. Any final comments on the work plan, which is the topic? And again, just to remind you all, please, it's in the packet, give it a read when you have a chance and shoot Courtney comments or suggestions. It is our sort of guiding roadmaps for what we're going to be working on, and your input is more than welcome. All right, with that, let's move on to the next item, which is item number 4. And this is the Regional Shoreline Monitoring Program updates and improvements. First up, Greg Heron from Coastal Frontiers, who's been doing this for us for a number of years and does a great job. And he will present the results from the 2022 Regional Shoreline Monitoring Program report. Following Greg, Keith Greer from SANDAG staff will present an overview of SANDAG's proposal to create an interactive open data regional shoreline monitoring portal, which is actually a lot more interesting than that sounds just from reading that. For some housekeeping, this is an open AB item, as we call it, so we'll be presenting both of them. So please hold your questions till the end. And with that, Greg, you're on.
Thank you, Dwight. Okay, so as Dwight said, we're going to be talking about the findings of the 2022 Regional Beach Sand or Regional Shoreline Monitoring Program. So to get us in the right headspace, this is going to be results up through the October 2022 survey. So we're not capturing this last winter with all the rains and some of the heavy wave storms. We'll get that next year in the next round. Today we're going to get into the data right away without a lot of background information, but briefly, for those of you who may be new to the group, SANDAG's been conducting a shoreline monitoring program since 1996. We're measuring changes in the shore zone, keeping track of the condition of the beaches, and trying to gather the information needed to understand impacts of natural events like El Niños and human intervention like the Regional Beach Sand 1 and 2 projects. We are doing beach profile surveys in the fall and spring, corresponding to the beginning and end of the winter wave season at 59 sites from Oceanside Harbor to the U.S.-Mexico border. SANDAG's program is supplemented by similar work conducted by the cities of Carlsbad, Encinitas, and Solana Beach. So we're going to look at beach conditions and outcomes at the 11 subreaches shown on the right-hand side there, from Oceanside in the north to Imperial Beach in the south. These are the same subreaches that we've used in the past. They're defined on a combination of municipal and geographic boundaries. And we'll talk about these in terms of beach width and shore zone volume changes. And if you remember shore zone volume, we're trying to account for the amount of sand in the littoral system from the back beach seaward out through the surf zone to a depth where the sand's not really being affected much anymore by waves and currents. So as promised, getting right to it. If any of you have had a chance to look at the most recent annual report, you may have noticed that there's a new set of figures in here, sort of these dashboard type figures where we're trying to capture all the most relevant information for each of these subreaches in one place. These are 11 by 17s in the report. So the idea is that you can go to each of these figures at your beach and get the most up-to-date information of the beach condition and how you got there. So on this figure here, we have a map on the right showing all of the beach profiles transects in the Oceanside subreach. A recent photo just illustrating the condition of the beach here showing cobbles at Oceanside, which has not been uncommon recently. The tabulations below are just showing the shore zone volume and beach width information for each of those individual transects. So for example, we have the beach width in fall 2022 at each of those locations, the most recent seasonal changes, winter and summer, most recent annual change, and then the change of what we call the post-RBSP1 period. So we're going from fall 2000 to, in this case, fall 2022. So just before Regional Beach Sand 1 to the most current survey. And so on the left-hand side, we're summarizing this information graphically. On the top panel, this is the net change in beach width from fall 2000 to fall 2022. So this is like you're standing on the beach looking offshore. So each of the transects is shown there, as well as the more common names such as Tyson Street, Buccaneer Beach, and whatnot. And as we go through this, you'll see red is erosion and green is accretion. But in Oceanside, over this 2-decade period, we have losses throughout the region approaching about 50 feet. So the next question is, how did we get to this point? And we can look at the panel on the bottom left for that. And here we are showing a time series of the average mean sea level beach width and shore zone volume changes in this subreach. The vertical lines are indicating the timing of regional beach sand 1 and 2. And so you can see after each of the regional beach sand projects, we had gains, that they were only sustained for a couple years because of this overlying trend of erosion. So on the very bottom left-hand side of the plots, you can see some of the particulars. So for example, the erosion rate here in Oceanside is about 2.3 feet per year over this 22-year period. So one takeaway here is that regional beach sand projects were conducted about 10, 11 years apart. So at a beach like this, if we want to keep wider beaches, that's probably going to have to be a more frequent interval. Further to the south, the neighbor North Carlsbad, a very different outcome. On the upper left-hand side, we can see the preponderance of green. So we've had gains pretty much throughout this region, except for the north portion up at Buena Vista Lagoon. And then when we look at the time series plot, very interesting, we have the gains right after regional beach sand 1, very little change through the next decade, more gains in regional beach sand 2, and then now we have a trend of erosion happening in the most recent decade. What's interesting here is like maybe why things are a little different after each project. I mean, of course, wave conditions play a large role. But at this particular location, we have Agua Hedionda Lagoon and the sand bypassing that's conducted there. In the first part of this period, the early 2000s, that was conducted pretty regularly every other year. And more recently, it's been conducted every 3 to 4 years. So there's less opportunity for sand management here. But over the time period, beaches are about 30 feet wider on average than 20 years ago. South Carlsbad, we've talked about this reach many times in the past as being one that just doesn't seem to be able to hang on to any sand, even though it did receive material in both regional beach sand 1 and 2. So an underlying erosion rate of about 2 feet per year at this location. Beach is about 40 feet narrower than 20 years ago. We're in the Encinitas Luqadda subreach. That's from Bataquitos Lagoon down to Moonlight Beach. And here, kind of like Oceanside, we have a net erosion occurring over the last 2 decades, indicated by all the red up above. And then also like Oceanside, we do see gains after each of the regional beach sand 1 and 2, but they only persist for a couple of years. Underlying trend here of erosion approaching 3 feet per year. Cardiff subreach, a very different outcome for a variety of reasons. Received sand on regional beach sand 1 and 2. Gains occurring after each that were sustained for pretty long periods. What's interesting here is there's one more slug of sand coming in from the San Elijo Lagoon Restoration Project in 2018. So we just keep stepping up at this location. But we do have a recent trend of erosion the last 5 or 6 years. Interesting here that the Living Shoreline project was built around the time that the slurp material went on the beach. So it's really the wider beaches that have been built by regional beach sand 1 and 2, as well as some inlet maintenance that San Elijo's done more frequently, that's allowed that living shoreline to actually persist and perform as it has. Solana Beach, we only have one transect here dating back to 2000, so that's why it looks like just a bar graph. But like Cardiff, beaches are about 100 feet wider than they were 20 years ago. And as it also receives sand from the Slurp project. And you can look at the time series and just see the beach width stepping up after each project. So the underlying trend here, including because of all these projects that have been conducted, gains of about 5 feet per year. So beach is about 100 feet wider than 20 years ago. Del Mar, a unique outcome, different than most of the rest. They did receive sand from RBSP 1, and we had gains from those. It did not participate in RBSP 2, so we don't see the gains immediately after that. But there is a trend of increasing beach widths after about 2015 or so, I would say, and that may be due to material coming down from Solana Beach, placed in RBSP 2 and the Slurp project. Taken together, it's been in fairly stable condition, 0 feet per year change, and beaches are about 14 feet wider than 20 years ago. Southernmost subreach in the oceanside cell is La Jolla. You can see here on the red-green plot at the top, there's been some modest gains of about 50 feet near the Scripps Pier, but elsewhere through the region where all the recreation is taking place, beach is largely unchanged, maybe a loss of 5 to 10 feet on average. And if we look at the time series plot, it's pretty flat. It didn't receive sand from RBSP 1 or 2. I'm just leaving those lines on there just to kind of provide some scale to the time. But beach width change trend just flat, 0.1 feet per year. Moving down to the Mission Bay or Mission Beach littoral cell. Gains after RBSP 1 did not participate in RBSP 2, but you see a big jump in 2010. That's from the Corps of Engineers dredging project, which put about 400,000 cubic yards on the beach. When we step back and look at the trends, beaches are about 15 feet wider than narrow. You can see from the plot above, that's mainly in the southern part of the cell, or the southern part of the reach, and the trend's been pretty flat over the last 20 years. Around the corner to the Silver Strand cell at Coronado, like Solana Beach, there's just one transect at this location. It has experienced substantial erosion, probably the most in the region, loss of about 81 feet over the last 22 years, and the highest erosion rate among all the subreaches approaching 4 feet per year. Saving grace here is the beach is about 700 feet wide, so it has plenty of room to retreat. But if you look at the map on the right-hand side, you can see that there is some development south of that transect with some coastal squeeze, as we would call it. So those areas are going to be a little more vulnerable, particularly if they're experiencing similar erosion rates. And finally, the city of Imperial Beach, there's been some gains at the southern end of the city near the south end of Seacoast Drive, modest losses up near the pier. If we look at the time series of changes, we see the gains after regional beach sand 1 and 2. In the middle of the period, about 2006, there was about 300,000 cubic yards of material placed by the Corps of Engineers offshore. So that's accounting for some of those gains in the middle. But it's this a pattern of gains after nourishment and gradual losses thereafter. As a result, the beach width change trend's pretty flat over the last 22 years, and the average beach width is only about 20 feet wider than it was before we started the regional beach sand projects. So this slide's just summarizing it all. Subreaches on the left, put the fall 2022 beach width in the next column, and then the shoreline change rate, whether it's eroding, accreting, or stable. And I've just kind of put some stoplight colors to it. I think going into a winter with a beach width less than about 100 feet should probably get your attention. So we've colored that red. Beach widths in that 150 foot to 200 foot range in yellow. And then the widest beaches greater than 200 feet in green. And done the same thing with the shoreline erosion rates, kind of eroding, stable, or accreting. And then on the far right on the map itself, just kind of assign some categories to those subreaches. So Oceanside's probably pretty critical. Narrow beaches already eroding at 2.3 feet per year. Carlsbad, it's kind of got somewhere in the middle with 140 foot average beach width, but it's accreting over the long term. So we're calling that green, for example. And you get to places like Del Mar, which is about almost a 200 foot beach width and basically no shoreline change trend, 0 feet per year, just keeping that yellow as stable. So you can find your beach there and see if where you ended up on the stoplight scale. So that concludes what I wanted to share with you today. I'm going to hand it over to Keith.
All right, thank you very much, Greg. Stick around. I'm sure we'll have some questions for you after. Keith, you're going to tell us about this exciting new portal.
Yes, hello. For those who don't know me, I'm Keith Greer. I'm the environmental manager here at SANDAG, and I'm in charge of oversight of the Shoreline program. And I want to talk to you about the possible evolution of the monitoring program. So I know you got questions for Greg, and I think it's a very interesting report. It's a very complex report, but there's lots of information there. And so I want to talk about the possibility of taking that information and making it more understandable and usable in the future. So we have an incredible wealth, and it's great that Greg and Coastal Frontiers has been doing this for the last 27 years. That's 27 years, 2 times, once in the spring, once in the fall. That's a lot of data. But what happens is after Greg presents it to the working group, we take those reports and we put them in a box, and those boxes stack up because they're not really dynamic. You can't really use them in any kind of format. If you want them, you call Greg up or you call Courtney up and you get the reports. More recently, you have a digital copy or a PDF, but it's not that as usable. So talking to my colleagues over here at SANDAG in our data science group. So if you don't know, SANDAG has a fabulous data science team. They do wonderful things with data to make it more usable. So one of the things we have is called the SANDAG Open Data Portal. And this is a place where you can store data, you can retrieve data, and most important for the public, you can visualize that data. So I want to talk about the possibility of taking the Shoreline data and putting it into the Open Data Portal. And I want to do that in a way that you can get most related with right now. So I want to talk about something that you all deal with, which is traffic on your freeways. We have a data portal for highway traffic data. This information comes from Caltrans. My colleagues in the data science team takes that information and makes it into I'll call it a website. They probably have a different fancier name for it. But the one thing I'll show you is that's very similar to what you saw with Greg's presentations, where on the left-hand side, there's a spatial component. These transects along the way, and they have different areas in the freeway systems they monitor. And they do so over time, which is on the right-hand side of this. In this case, it shows the traffic volumes. And the nice trend here is we always talk about, how has traffic returned since the pandemic? You can see that big dip there during the pandemic, and you can see various number of in this case, transects of traffic volumes over time, showing you how it relates to the pandemic and has traffic truly returned. What I want to present to you is this is very similar to the Shoreline data. And my quick mock-up here, taking Greg's data, there's a spatial component to it. There's a trend over time component. We can look at this in various ways, regionally, littoral cell, sub-reach, by jurisdictions. And so our proposal is to take this data that we have in the last 27 years and put it into a usable format so that all of you can access it anytime you want to. And that as future contractors get more data, it goes into this format. Very usable, very simple. And then coming to you next year, whenever we can put this together, Greg can speak directly from this interactive data portal. Another possible phase is the possibility of using community science. You'll remember that Dr. Julie Feelings from Scripps came and talked about the Coast Snaps program, which is a place where you took your volunteers or people from the public can put their phone in on a cradle, push that button, and it takes a picture of the coastline. Right now, Scripps manages 5 of those sites where the information comes into a database, and they have an output, which is kind of shown here on the right-hand side. Encinitas has a site out there at Grandview Beach, and I believe Oceanside's also getting a site. So a possible future addition would be to take that and make it a regional database, adding more cradles, having that information come into a regional database, into a regional website, and then using that information into our monitoring programs as well. So 2 things going on, taking existing data and putting it into a data portal, and the possibility of taking and incorporation community science into that future monitoring. So what's the next steps? We're going to be seeking grant funding, specifically from the Coastal Conservancy. We've already approached them about this for both phases. And then we're hopeful we'll hear back in this next 3 months and report back at your December meeting on the progress made to seek funding, get the information into a usable format on our open data portal. So that concludes the presentation, both our presentations, and we turn over the chair to ask any questions you may have and any kind of discussion you may have.
All right, thank you very much, Keith and Greg. What I'm going to do is let's see if we have any working group member questions. Then we'll take public comment, and then we'll come back to the working group to see if you all have comments. So first, do we have any questions from working group members? Yes.
I did have a question for Keith. What is the anticipated funding requirements for what you're proposing?
We haven't done what we call independent cost estimate, but roughly, I think it's about $50,000 for the first phase and maybe another $50,000 to $60,000 for the second phase. The real big keys are these regional databases and all the kind of back behind the scenes manipulation that are required.
All right, thank you for that. Other questions from the working group? Ms. Gasterland.
So you may or may not have an answer to the question. I guess this is for Greg. In the slides where you're showing the changes in beaches, in the lower right-hand corner of each of those, could you go first to Imperial Beach? And let's look at the lower right-hand corner. Yeah. So here we're seeing overall, and I'm assuming that each one of these blue dots with the lines connecting them are the number of feet different from in 2000. So what we're looking at here is what is the change since 2000 for that beach at that time. Okay, and then the red is the volume. So that's cubic yards of sand per foot. And
Yes.
what we're seeing is a great loss in cubic yards per sand per foot compared to beach width loss. So I'm noticing that I see that, you know, Imperial Beach has beach width gain really, but with a lot of cubic yardage, you know, volume loss. And now let's go to the Del Mar slide. Okay, so here what we're seeing is the opposite. We're seeing beach width loss, but with significant cubic yards of sand gain. And so this seems somewhat counterintuitive to me. And so I'm wondering how do we wrap our head around this? That here we have Imperial Beach with overall sand loss, but sand gain, but beach width loss. And we have Del Mar with beach width gain, but huge losses of sand, cubic yard wise. What's going on?
So you picked the two that don't track together, right? But that's good. And I think there's some reasons for that. One of them is that there's only 2 transects for each one. So it's not like Encinitas where I've got 6 spreading out. Mm-hmm. As we look at Del Mar in particular, I think one of the things that's going on there is of those 2 transects, so half of that weighting effectively is that transect DM 590 at San Dieguito Lagoon. And the volume in particular is very heavily influenced by that delta out there and how much sand is sitting in that delta. So I think that's driving this difference here at Del Mar. And it's also because that transect's up right next to the lagoon. The beach widths are almost sometimes influenced by how that lagoon's outflowing and where that channel is. So you picked out the tough ones.
Well, on purpose. Good. I mean, these are the ones that really stand out. Everything else, the lines track with each other.
Yeah, as they should. I mean, to have the beach width's going to increase when the volume in your system increases and vice versa. These two don't track as well. I think Imperial Beach is a little bit harder to explain because it doesn't necessarily have that delta. I think it somewhat goes back to just having 2 transects. But that one's a harder one to explain that I've struggled with as well.
So what I'm hearing is that this may be an artifact of how the data is being collected, but I'm seeing my colleague from Scripps Institution of Oceanography shaking his head. So it may be that there's more to think about here. And what this means is that the shoreline monitoring needs more subtlety to it. That's my conclusion.
Yeah, I think.
And I see a lot of head nodding over here.
Maybe Ron will nod if I say this is not necessarily how it's being collected, but where it's being collected. And so again, these programs become very much a balance between science and budget, right? So we'd love to do this 8 times a year at 5 times as many sites, but that's not going to be sustainable, which I think the strength of this program is that it's been sustained by SANDAG for almost 30 years. So I think, that 590, I'm going to guess, was a transect that was established back in the 80s. And that's why we selected it to continue on to keep that longer data set. But the reality is Del Mar could probably use some more transects on the beaches that they're really interested in. Yeah. And, the first year it's like, why am I doing this? But 30 years in, you're like, wow, look what I've got.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. We're still on questions. Dr. Flick, you have a question?
Wow. Yeah. And how? Let me see. Let me address the volume versus width. So the beach can get narrower and have the same volume or even more volume if the sand moves offshore, right? Because the volume is across the entire width of the active shore zone. That's not just the beach. So, you know, there's only really a loose connection between the two, but that's a technical detail. And part of and Del Mar, we call this SIO1. That helped pour the concrete there, you know, just before the 1982-83 storms. It's in the seawall by that White House, right on the corner of the lagoon. Anyway, details. I wanted to start out, and this is more of a comment than questions, obviously.
Can you hold it if it's a comment? Because we need to take the public comment before we get into
let me put
comment.
a question mark behind each one of those then.
Okay, give it a try and we'll see how you do.
I think it's important though that the committee hear what I have to say. So let me.
I'm not saying otherwise.
After is fine.
All right, then. So any final questions before we move to public comment? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Out of curiosity, can we bring up slide 2022 report summary where it outlines which of the shorelines are accreting and eroding? So on the north side, we see Oceanside, North Carlsbad, South Carlsbad, and Encinitas. The only one accreting is North Carlsbad. What do you attribute that to?
I think we can attribute that to a couple things. One, you got the Agua Hedionda jetties there that's holding shoreline. It's like a groin, effectively. Also, it's getting material coming down from Oceanside, from Regional Beach Sand 1, Regional Beach Sand 2, and also when they're doing harbor bypassing to some extent. So it's feeding that area. But I think the most important thing is it's those two jetties there that are holding that beach.
All right. Thank you. Other questions?
Yes, thank you.
All righty. Let's, Tessa, do we have some public comments at this point?
Thank you, Chair. We do have 3 virtual public commenters on this item. The first is the original draw. Please go ahead.
So actually, some of the questions you all asked, I was kind of curious about. I guess if you have this happening and it's eroding faster in other places, obviously you have your ideas of why. Are you doing things to mitigate that and ensure that you can stay on top of it so that, I don't know if you need to put more sand or figure out something to have the work that you're doing last longer? Are you putting the same amounts of cubic feet of sand or whatever on each project, or is it determined by the project? And then also this whole data thing, I'm a little bit confused on your Coast Snaps thing. You're saying that the people would take a picture, but it goes upon the database. I don't understand how that would work. Does the actual device not have a camera in it and it's dependent upon someone using their cell phone to take the picture? And then how would that information get on the database? I guess I just don't understand how you need someone to take the picture. And why these devices, like, are they part of what's going to cost so much in your phase 1 and phase 2 of the database information that you're collecting? And then I had something else. Hang on. Yeah, I'm not sure at this point, but if you could answer those, because I feel like it's a little bit ambiguous as far as that data collection thing goes. I don't know if there's another, like a website you can look at that people have used it so that we can see what it would entail. But it's a little bit weird if you're going to be collecting cell phone data. I don't know how you would do that, how it would be hooked up to that, but that just seems a little bit dangerous. But if it's the actual device that you were showing that is doing it, then I don't know. I guess it's just a little bit weird. Thanks.
All right, thank you for your comment. On the Coast Snap, we did have a presentation about that at a prior working group meeting. I would refer you to the website. You can read all about it. Basically, it's a metal frame that you stick your cell phone in and take a picture and upload it, and the data are collected. Next speaker.
Dr. Lynn Gilson, please go ahead.
Hi, yeah, I'm just wanted to comment and ask also about the data presentation. I know this is tough when there's so many scientists in the room. This is what we all tend to key on. And you know, I live in Encinitas, so I'm pretty aware of what's going on up here. And you know, I know even what's being presented, you know, as a kind of combined data snapshot for Luqadda, our city is really treating this area quite differently. Things that are south of Beacons Beach are getting sand treatment, things north are not. And so it would be really useful for the cities, I think, to have this maybe broken out more so that the data can be presented according to the replenishments that are actually being done, and be able to kind of view the data more simply in that way, perhaps. I know it's a tough decision how to present data. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments, and staff will take those into account. If we don't get to the Port District in the next 4 or 5 minutes, we're going to encroach on their time, and you don't want to miss that. So I don't want to short play your questions, but if you want to follow up, staff can deal with them more, but we're really not in a position to address your questions from the public at this point. So another speaker.
Thank you. Our final speaker on this item, Catherine Rhodes, please go ahead.
Hello, thank you so much. And the open, this is Catherine Rhodes, and the open data portal and the community science info, that sounds really great. So that looks lovely. And I also want to say, you know, I really, really love your report, except for the big, huge gapping, missing information. So anyway, you have 59 sites that you're monitoring, but you're missing information for the majority of the Mission Bay littoral cell. You're missing information starting, you have La Jolla Shores, but then you're missing information from the La Jolla Submarine Canyon to Pacific Beach, Ocean Beach, and Point Loma. So most of the missing beaches are in the city of San Diego. And I think if you're not getting, if you don't have enough funding for that, I know that the city of San Diego has a lot of money. And if you actually called me, I could show you where this money could be so that you could actually do some work on these beaches, the most densely populated areas. So some of the most, you know, some of these densely populated coastal areas that are being ignored include La Jolla Cove, Children's Pool, Wind and Sea, Bird Rock, Tourmaline, Pacific Beach, Ocean Beach, and Point Loma. You know, there's a lot of erosion in, let's say, Tourmaline and Point Loma, but because you guys don't collect any information, you know, we don't have historical data that could be used. So my recommendation is that you look for new funding sources so that you could actually monitor these really important areas that are not being monitoring. And, you know, for me, I actually live, you know, on the boardwalk here in Pacific Beach by some eroding cliffs. Nobody ever monitors this ever. There's so many solutions, but since we don't have any data, you know, we can't actually bring forth any type of science or anything. So, you know, one of the other big areas where there's a lot of beach loss is Tourmaline Beach and all those houses on the cliff that, you know, are about ready to fall down. I think there's so many solutions, but without the data, we can't come up with solutions. So just please think about finding extra money so that instead of 59 sites, you could add, you know, at least another 8 sites, and we could actually get some good information for the city of San Diego that I think is even more important than some of the sites that you're looking at now. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment. Tessa, that concludes the comments, correct?
That concludes the public comments.
All right, Dr. Flick, who is an expert in this field, I want to make sure you get a chance to make your comments, and then we'll take other comments for a couple of minutes if we can. So Dr. Flick.
Yeah, thanks. I'll make it quick. First of all, I want to compliment Coastal Frontiers and especially Greg. I've done hundreds of beach profile surveys myself, and I know how hard the work is. And secondly, Keith reminded me that why we need planners as well as scientists and engineers. So thank you for that. The idea is to bring this data, make it much more available to the public. It's already available to researchers. I mean, you can download all those data files from the SANDAG website. That's not really a problem, but it doesn't bring the public in. And that's just a genius idea. And it's part of a much larger trend in science, which our coastal processes group that was shown up there is also trying to do, including part of the Coast Snap program is part of that. The other thing I want to say, I want to compliment SANDAG for its long-term support for this. I've been sitting here since the mid-'80s in this committee, and I was part of I helped design the monitoring program. But at the time, it was unfashionable to do monitoring. It's become more fashionable now with climate change because we realize much more than we did in the 80s and 90s, the value of long-term time series. And so I would encourage this group, whatever you do and whatever you spend money on, please do not stop funding this program. If we can expand it, that'd be great. But let's keep funding what we have. Now, having said that, it's not the be-all and end-all, but it does fit in. Well, it doesn't fit in. It creates the context for the large-scale context in time and space for the much more detailed studies that we do. The Coastal Processes Group does its scripts with state and federal Corps of Engineers support. And this volume question is a key example of this. I think Sri Gopal presented a couple of meetings ago or last meeting or whenever it was, the story of Cardiff State Beach. In front of San Alejo Lagoon. And there's one profile. You have one profile right in the middle of that, right? But they have the scripts group has the whole thing. And so it can tell that story much better. So we need both. We need to put both on on Keith's portal for SANDAG. It's a wonderful idea. Please do not stop supporting this. It's just critical in the future, and it'll get more critical as sea level rise accelerates.
All right, thank you very much for that. I want to move on to the Port District, but if anybody has a burning comment they just really need to make, we can hear it. And if you have comments that aren't burning or on fire, I'm sure Keith or Greg would be happy to hear them after, but I want to get us out of here on time for people that have to leave. So last shot, I'm not seeing any hands for a burning comment. Yes, Mike.
I know you're short on time, and I'll just make this very quick. I just wanted to put this idea out, and that is that I wondered if the staff and maybe us as a group could look at whether or not we should include looking at beaches within the bay. Now, the feasibility study that was mentioned, we're going to, I guess, work will be started by our next meeting. We've actually asked, and I know it was included in the RFP, to take a look at a feasibility study level. But I can tell you in Coronado, we have a couple of areas that have become very worrisome for us as far as beach erosion. And I know this is all part of the port as well. So I don't want to get cross-threaded with, two different groups looking at the same thing. But I just wanted to float that idea that down the line, we may want to look at including in a report like this and a survey looking at maybe some hotspots that may be occurring on the bay side in addition to the ocean. So thank you for the time.
Thank you for that, Mike. And I see nods over there, so I think that's a good suggestion. All righty, let's move on to the next item. That item was just information. There's no action required by the working group. Next is item 5, and this is the Port of San Diego Nature-Based Climate Solutions. And Eileen Maher is here, and she will present an overview, the results, and lessons learned on one of San Diego's blue economy pilot projects called Econcrete, which uses innovative technology, coastal lock that replaces traditional riprap to increase shoreline ecological armoring. Eileen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eileen Maher. I'm the Director of Environmental Conservation for the Port of San Diego.
And today I will be discussing some of our innovative solutions for climate change through our Blue Economy Incubator and our nature-based solution projects. For the benefit of the public, the port's jurisdiction includes state tidelands in and around San Diego and our 5 member cities. We have 34 miles of shoreline within the bay, and we hold the land in trust for the citizens of the state of California. We are state legislated trustee for submerged lands also, and to fulfill our public trust responsibilities, the port promotes and balances navigation, recreation, fisheries, commerce, as well as aligning our mission to enhance and protect the environment, all through funding through lease agreements and no taxpayer funding. So while the port has been part of the blue economy sector for decades, one of our newest programs is called our Blue Economy Incubator. And our incubator was specifically set up to assist in the creation, development, and scaling of new water-dependent business ventures to remove barriers to entry by facilitating the development of emerging sustainable aquaculture and port-related blue tech innovation. And through the incubator and other grant-funded initiatives, the port is building a portfolio of nature-based solutions that advance some of our important priorities that align with state goals and actions to enhance the environment and protect against climate change. So the port has been exploring ways to infuse nature-based solutions into existing armored shorelines. As part of our incubator, we began collaborating with a company out of Israel called eConcrete, starting in 2018, working through several iterations of design, permitting, COVID, and we were able to install the eConcrete's Coast Lock tide pools in March of 2021. This is the first installation of its kind in the world. So the eConcrete tide pool armor project is located in North San Diego Bay along Harbor Island. And if you're extremely careful at low tide, you can walk down across the existing rock and check out the tide pools. This is an example of a hybrid typed approach that incorporates nature-based applications into a hardened structure to boost habitat value and resiliency while maintaining the current structural requirements of the shoreline. So with this project, we think we've redefined how urban shorelines can fit into natural systems. Almost immediately after installation, we began to see a complex community establishing on the tide pool units. The units are packed with oysters and mussels, several fish species, lobsters, octopus, and crabs, among others. And each monitoring effort is indicating an increase in species richness and a diversity compared to the existing rock riprap, which has been in place for over 70 years. Structurally, we have determined that these units are much stronger than needed, and we plan on the conservative side. But they're holding up incredibly well with no movement since installation and no deterioration of the materials. So we removed existing rock riprap, placed the interlocking tide pool units. They are all one shape. By blocking them together, it causes that structural stability that was in place from day one. The units are placed from a 0 to a +5, so in the intertidal range. So they get water twice a day. Sometimes they're submerged all the time. Sometimes they're out of the water. They are oriented in different directions. The lowest level is at a 90-degree angle, which actually the native Olympia oysters really like that, being hidden a little bit under the rocks. Where the upper units maintain water and act like a traditional tide pool, even at low tides. So the success of the design also relies on a bioadditive mixture for the cement, typically cement repels any type of life. But the chemicals were adjusted to be able to balance the pH, and actually you can see the textures and the different grooves within the rock that causes the marine life to call this home. So in partnership with a local contractor, we removed about 72 or 150 linear feet, put in 72 interlocking tide pools. Results from the very beginning showed, you can see all the wildlife that has occurred within the first 8 months. We have a 2-year study that we're waiting to, it just came in this week. I haven't actually looked at it yet. I got it yesterday in my email. So we think it'll be just as successful here, but you can see the abundant growth of mussels, a lot of lobsters, sea hares, a lot of different algae, crabs, the blue heron foraging, eating the sea hares. So it's been a really good mix of wildlife out there, especially compared to the control site, which is the adjacent rocks. Again, different shots of crabs and the algae that are inhibiting. So overall, the results obtained to date show community transition, which is richer, more diverse, and a natural community with fewer invasive species. Ultimate results from this pilot project will serve to demonstrate an innovative win-win approach for coastal protection by providing resiliency and adaptation strategies in an urban environment, while simultaneously enhancing valuable marine life and boosting local ecosystems. You can see here the sea hare on the left and the Navinax on the right. A lot of mussels, a lot of algae growth. And the oysters have also been having a really fun time with this project. More growth, snails, algae. It's been a great little ecosystem going on there. And structural integrity has held up and not causing any issues, which is extremely important because it's a very steep 3-to-1 slope. So capitalizing on this momentum, we have been able to find funding for to add on to e-concrete at Harbor Island. Specifically, the original projects to the left, we're going to add another couple hundred feet of rock riprap and shoreline. We're almost done with our plans and specs. We were given funding by NOAA to support this additional project, and hopefully we'll have it in place a year from now, if not the end of next year. Next month at our board meeting, they will approve a project with funding from the city of San Diego through a supplemental environmental project to add another 1,000 linear feet. This is along Sweetwater Channel, National Cities to the north, City of Chula Vista to the south. To replace the rock riprap and add this habitat value. We also think it'll add a good educational component for the local community. So with that, my personal goal is to try to save the planet 1 acre at a time. And so my vision for the Bay is to see replacement of riprap with more projects like this. Not necessarily this project specifically, but anything that can add that habitat value. So, and hopefully see a lot more wildlife. And with that, thank you for your time, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you so much, Eileen. That's fascinating. Stand by for questions. Let's follow the same process. Questions from the working group first, questions, and then we'll take public comment, and then we'll come back to the working group for your comments. So does anybody in the working group have a comment or a question, for Eileen? I have one. Have these been used at all in the surf zone, or is this strictly a calm water proposal?
Because this is the first in the country that was used, and they're just starting to put it in other places. I know they've been using it in Israel, but I think they've been using it they have been using it in the surf zone in other countries, but not here.
Councilmember Gasterland.
Could you briefly comment on what makes e-concrete and this triangular shape so good for restoring habitat? And is it better than, adding riprap for restoring habitat?
So we found that riprap, which has been functional for decades, just doesn't provide that same habitat value. It doesn't provide or attract the algae that's going to attract the lobsters and fish and birds to the area. Because so the interlocking portion of it, the diamond shape of it, helps it stack on top of each other to provide that structural support. And then the interior, with being able to hold water at high tides, and the grooves within attracts the mussels and the oysters for home. So rock doesn't provide that same value.
Yeah. So I grew up on the Chesapeake Bay, and I'm imagining all sorts of places, especially along the Potomac River, the Baltimore Harbor, where it's been eroding for, a long time. And wouldn't it be amazing to put this there? I hope this goes everywhere. So congratulations on the Port of San Diego.
We do too. And I know there's a project in New York Harbor or along the Hudson River, but I don't know exactly what they're using.
Thank you. Other questions? If not, Tessa, do we have public speakers that want to address us on this topic?
Thank you, Chair. We have two public speakers on this item. The first is the original draw. Please go ahead.
I guess I'm just curious about this concrete that you're saying is there was something done to it to make it so that it isn't basically toxic or something. How would you really know if you're the first to do this in the nation? And there's no study on that. And has there been long-term study on this concrete in the water so that you know that what you say is actually factual, or is it just, you're assuming so? How long has it even been studied, and what makes you believe that that is a fact and that it isn't? Or is this a test and you're going to have to find out through using it whether or not it is? That's it.
All right, thank you. And if we have time, I'm going to ask Eileen if she wants to take a shot at answering that later. But let's hear the next speaker, and thank you.
Our final speaker on this item, Catherine Rhodes, please go ahead.
Hello, this is Catherine Rhodes, and these eco-concrete coastal lock tide pools, they look great. So anyway, I can't wait to actually go to a low tide and actually look at these tide pools. It sounds wonderful. As an engineer, we always have learned that using rock riprap is a great way to dissipate wave energy and help stop erosion, specifically on our reclaimed tidelands that are sitting on top of liquefiable soils. And of course, these reclaimed tidelands are inherently unstable. So anyway, man-made structures, do not dissipate wave energy as good old cheap riprap. And I don't really know enough, but just off the top of my head, seeing this for the first time, I would think I would recommend not taking out any of the structural riprap and see to put in new tide pools, and then see if you could somehow maybe instead put these new eco-concrete coastal lock tide pools on top of the riprap. So, it's additional protection instead of a replacement protection, which won't be as good. It's good for, of course, life, but maybe not for structural integrity. And then one thing that just happened, I think it was last year, which is huge, gigantic news. The Port of San Diego was recently given authority to actually build past the U.S. bulkhead line, which is located right now at the end of the piers, like, for example, end of Broadway Pier. Now, the port is given jurisdiction so that you could actually build, let's say, if you wanted to build a new opera house or something on San Diego Bay, you could actually build it in San Diego Bay. You could actually build out so much more outside of San Diego Bay. And it seems like this would be a great, way to even create more tide pools. So, and And so that's it. Very interesting. And this looks great. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And I assume that's all the speakers, Tessa?
That concludes the public commenters.
All right, thank you. Then Eileen, let me give you a brief chance if you want to respond to the question and I'll summarize. How do we know these aren't toxic and that they're safe?
They are not toxic. They are safe. We can tell that by the amount of growth that immediately started to attach to the tide pool structures. We have monitoring from 8 months and I believe 12 months. Those reports are on our website at portofsandiego.org, and full reports are there that discuss the success of these projects. And once staff has reviewed the final report, like I said, I just got it this week, we will also place that on our website for full transparency.
All right, thank you. I was going to ask you about that. So anybody in the public or on the working group that wants to learn more about this can go to the Port District website and read all about e-concrete. All right, in the few minutes we have left, does anybody have another question or a comment that you'd like to make about the Port District proposals? Yes, Dr. Flick.
Yeah, this looks great, but as Chair, as to your question about using these in high energy wave environments, which the bay obviously is not, right? That's why it's a bay. These are probably too small. The 16-second waves at 10 feet high would probably just toss this size around, I'm guessing. So maybe bigger ones, but yeah, you don't really, I don't think you want this on an open beach type environment anyway. The other thing I would say in response to the question of why is this a better habitat than riprap, I'm not a biologist, but the flow, riprap, as was said by one of the commenters, is designed to dissipate wave energy. And there's a huge surge through, if you've ever been lobster diving, in Mission Bay, say, you'll see the huge wave surge and water surge in the interstices and in between the rocks. And so it takes muscle type glue and limpet type glue to stay stuck in something like that. And tide pools are, they're called tide pools for a reason. And if you look at the shape of these rocks, they're little pools. And so they have quiescent water, at least when the waves aren't splashing up on them. And that would make them, seems like it makes them ideal for these kind of habitats. So this is a great thing. They should line the whole bay with it.
All right, thank you for that. Any other comments? I'm not seeing any, so thank you all for coming. Thanks to the public for participating. The next Shoreline Working Group meeting will be on December the 7th, and we'll hope to see you all back here then. And we are now adjourned. Thanks for coming.